moving over to video number 2. So I'm carrying on talking about the relationship between autism and a person's strengths. And I'm saying that while autism influences the strengths, because it's impossible for autism not to influence the strengths, considering that autism is pervasive and is a massive part of who the person is, in terms of the fact that autism obviously does affect the brain, it affects the whole brain, it affects how you see the world. I'm arguing that it is a massive leap to go from that to saying that autism determines your strengths. And I'm saying that I don't like that argument because I find it deeply dehumanising. The reason why I'm doing this video is actually twofold. First of all, recently I attend an autism women's group, and recently one of the discussions at the group was centred around strengths and autism. And it was intended to be a sort of self-esteem exercise to kind of boost our self-esteem by looking at how our autism might give us certain strengths. And I'm rather uncomfortable with this idea. I'm all for self-esteem boosting exercises, yes, but I'd rather it would look at each person as an individual without reducing everything to a clinical diagnosis, which I do find rather dehumanising, because I like to think that my strengths, I'm not denying, may well be influenced by my autism to some extent, but I'm also a unique human being. I'm an individual, as we all are, and I like to think as a free individual, free in inverted commas. Obviously there are massive problems with the notion of free, so I'm using it in air quotes, but you know, as someone who I like to think has some degree of agency and choice and self-determination, actually am not reduced to my diagnosis. I like to think that I have a certain uniqueness that cannot be reduced to my diagnosis. And that is why I do find it rather dehumanising when people tell me that any strengths I might have are because of my autism. I'm not saying they're not influenced by my autism. I'm happy with that. I'm not denying they might be influenced by my autism, or my autism might have some bearing, or that my autism might maybe exaggerate certain strengths, shall we say. But I don't want to think that my autism determines those strengths or defines them. So that was the first reason I wanted to talk about this. The other reason was that I was speaking to my psychologist today, and she's a really lovely person, her heart's in the right place, and she was well-intentioned, and again, I think she wanted to boost my self-esteem, and she wanted to, make me feel good about myself. So, you know, her heart's in the right place, she's a nice person, but it's to do with the argument that she was raising, the issues she was raising, which I cannot agree with, and I'm perfectly entitled not to agree with it. We don't have to agree with what everyone says. I do not agree with, I take issues with. So, again, she was talking about strengths, but she wasn't looking at it from a kind of individual perspective, as strengths that I might have as a unique human being. She was basically saying that the strengths I have are all down to my autism. Was kind of, I don't know if that is what she was intending to say as such, but basically that's what it seemed to, basically is how I heard her, is what she was basically saying. So, she said, for example, my creativity, basically she said is basically linked to my autism, and I'm like thinking, but can you not be creative without being autistic? I know lots of non-autistic people who are creative. Maybe I just happen to be creative. I mean, if I wasn't autistic, would I may well still be a person who likes doing creative stuff, do you know what I mean? That's kind of, I don't really want to think that is reduced to my autism. What if that is just part of who I am as a person? Why does that have to be connected to my autism? Why? You know what I mean? That kind of struck me as a little bit odd. She said that I'm very internally motivated. Yes, I am very internally motivated. I always have been. If I'm interested in something and I see a reason to do it, I will do it because I just enjoy doing it, and I've always had that quality, I guess you could call it, which I guess is a positive, and it keeps me going even when things are shit. But again, how do we know it gets part of my autism, and what if that just happens to be part of who I am? Because I know that not all autistic people are self-motivated, for example, so it might actually just be part of my character, right? Focus and determination. Yes, autism can give us hyper-focus. That is actually one of the aspects of autism, very intense focus, extreme focus. That can be a double-edged sword, actually, because it can be good and bad, basically. So yeah, I'm not denying that probably may well be influenced by my autism. That one. Honesty. I'm pretty honest as a person, but again, that might just be me. By the way, it's a myth that autistic people don't lie. I know autistic people who do lie, so not all autistic people are honest. And yes, some autistic people are honest, but then again, so are many non-autistic people, so we mustn't assume. But yeah, that, again, may well just be me. How do we know that's part of the autism? So, anyway, so what I was saying, okay, so again what she said was, she was talking about how in childhood, we tend to focus a lot on diagnosis, which she said, yeah, is helpful. And of course diagnosis is helpful. You know, if you have basically a disability, then you need to know, right, don't you? So yeah, she acknowledged that, but again she said that they often focus on deficits and disorders and difficulties. I mean, yeah, because autism is a disorder, as I was thinking. I kept my mouth shut at that point. And then she said, but in the adult world now, we're a lot more about acceptance of neurodiversity as a spectrum on which we all sit. I was like thinking, okay, yeah, where is this heading? Because we're all human, we all sit on the human spectrum, and autism is a human condition, and autistics are human, so they're all on the human spectrum. But implying that we're all on this neuro spectrum kind of dilutes autism, and I don't like it. Autism, in my view, is a very serious condition, and I don't like the language which trivialises it. So yes, I was feeling rather uncomfortable at that point. Because it's not too far-fetched from going to bed saying we're all on the autism spectrum, which some people do argue, which is a load of crap. She then said that none is better or worse, it's just different, different ways of seeing the world. For example, synesthesia. Yes, I would say that synesthesia is you know, I generally like my synesthesia. I guess not, you know, synesthesia is fine, you know. I would happily remove the autism because let's face it, autism sucks, but I'd happily keep the synesthesia. Yeah, she's right there. Synesthesia is just a natural variation, like being homosexual is a natural variation. Autism, on the other hand, is a natural variation, yes, but it's also a disability. It's also an impairment. It also causes major difficulties. And I think that people who don't have these difficulties or disorders, it's all very well for them to paint it as all rose-tinted, but actually, really, they're in a privileged position, and they need to try and listen to people who do experience it as a disorder and not try and tell them that they are wrong, because that is infantilising and patronising AF, even from people who are trying to be well-intentioned and nice. So like I said, she's a really nice person, but I'm not happy with that argument. So I then said that I do see autism as a disorder, so I did tell her that. And that's when she told me that maybe I need to see things more double-edged, you know, that maybe autism also comes with gifts and so on. I didn't really want to get into an argument at this point because I hadn't really thought things out, and, you know, when I start arguing my corner, things get a little bit heated because it's very personal to me. So I didn't really, I just kind of, you know, I told her that it's a disorder, but, you know, I didn't really want to get into an argument. I wasn't really in the mood. But what I want to say is that I do think I see things double-edged, and I do think I see things nuanced. And the irony is actually people who insist that we must see autism. I mean, she did acknowledge obviously that it comes with a lot of difficulties, but I do sometimes think that some people don't get the nuance. That just because someone says it's a disorder, right, it doesn't mean they're being negative. Because I'm actually one of the least negative people there are. One of my ex-support workers actually said that to me. So, but I do see autism as a disorder, but I'm not a negative person generally. So two things can be true really. You can see autism as a disorder, but you can also accept the fact you have it. Just because you see something as a disorder and you can think things would be easier if I didn't have autism, and I do wish I didn't have it, and I'm entitled to wish that. That doesn't mean I'm negative, it just makes me human. It's like someone who's blind may often wish that they could see, but they can still accept the fact they're blind, and that doesn't make them depressed. Do you know what I mean? So you can see something as a disorder, and you can see things as deficits and still accept them, if that makes sense. And the other thing is that I do see autism as a major part of my identity, because of course it is. Being a woman is also part of my identity. Sorry, being a female is also a major part of my identity. Having brown hair is a big part of my identity. Being short is a big part of my identity. Okay? Being homosexual is a big part of my identity. So something can be part of your identity, but that doesn't mean that defines you. I'm not defined by being a woman. It's a big part of my identity. You know, it's always there. My womanness is a quality that always surrounds me. It shapes my experiences of the world. Just like my autism shapes my experiences of the world. Just like the fact I'm homosexual shapes my experiences of the world. But they don't define me, because I'm more than that. I'm also a human being outside of those categories. So something can be a big part of your identity, while at the same time not defining you, and people don't seem to understand that nuance. So people often say things like, oh, but we mustn't define ourselves. And I'm like, did I ever say I was defining myself? It's like they have some problem. I don't get it, you know. And they always want to tell you how to think as well. People who don't even have the condition. It's like so patronising. And the other thing I wanted to say is that I do feel that any strengths that I do have exist in a space between my facticity, and what I mean by facticity, it's an existential philosophical term, by the way. Facticity is your limitation. It's the kind of material baggage that you come into the world with. So, for example, your facticity, it could be anything, but I mean, being woman is my facticity in the sense that I never chose. It's basically stuff you haven't chosen, but it's material baggage. Okay, I'm happy with being a woman, but obviously I didn't make a choice to be a woman. But it's just, you know, so in a way that's neutral. But, you know, I never chose to be a woman. Maybe I might actually choose to be a man in this world, because it might actually be easier. But, you know, I'm happy with being a woman. But it's my facticity, it's my limitation in some respects in this world. Being a woman is actually a limitation. This isn't an analogy of autism, by the way, because obviously being a woman isn't a medical condition like autism. I'm just using it, you know, to talk about what facticity is. It's something you haven't chosen. It's a material kind of thing that you happen to carry with you. So obviously my womanhood might influence my experiences of the world and might possibly even shape some of my strengths, only because we live in a stereotyped society that says women should be doing this, men should be doing that, and obviously that does shape our brains because our brains are plastic. So it's possible that my womanhood has to some extent influenced my strengths, but it doesn't define my strengths, because my strengths exist in the space between my facticity and existence, okay? And so the facticity and existence both influence my strengths, but it's existence that defines them, not my facticity. I exist as a unique human